Hi, I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, today I want to talk about something that is very specific about Vedic astrology, and it's called the divisional charts. And these divisional charts are what really make this specific, and they are wonderful for prediction. So let me just talk a minute about my Patreon page because what I do with my Patreon members, those that are part of the Radiate tier, they get to come on and tell me what they would like for me to do a video on. And so I have somebody that wanted to know about, why don't you talk about the divisional charts? And that was Jacqueline Ann. So a shout out to Jacqueline Ann. Thank you for suggesting that I do a video on the divisional charts. And so I wanted to talk about, well, what they are. Because those of you that don't know astrology or maybe know Western astrology, this is something very different. Some people have likened the aspect of harmonics from Western astrology to this, but no, it's really something more than that. And one thing I did when I wrote my book, by the way, I'm going to use an example out of my book, which this is my textbook for my university called Eastern Astrology for Western Minds. I wrote this book 20 years ago, and it has everything that I need for my teaching. These used to be actually way back when I had a center before the internet. I had a center where I taught astrology. It was all in person. It was before we had the internet. Therefore, you had to come in person. And I used to teach these classes on different subjects in Vedic astrology. And so I had these extensive handouts. And then one day I said, I am so tired of printing out all these pages for these handouts. What if I put them all together in a book and then added to the book examples of the handouts? And that became Eastern Astrology for Western Minds. And therefore it is my textbook for the University of Vedic Astrology. And remember, you can become a member. We're going to start semester 1. It's time. If you've been on the fence, it's time, because we have a lot of new exciting things that are coming up for UVA, University of Vedic Astrology. And the price is going to increase, so you better get on board before it does. So we're going to start the end of January, early February, semester 1. And that means I'm going to be doing the live videos for semester 1. So get on board. Go to universityofvedicastrology.com. Okay, so let me talk about what divisional charts are. When I wrote this book 20 years ago, I thought, you know, I've got to figure out how to mathematically do these charts. And you take divisions of the horoscope in the chart and you divide them up. And there's a whole mathematical formula for each divisional chart. And when I did these, I really got a sense of the mathematical beauty of Vedic astrology. That is so profound when you understand that it's all mathematical, it's all numbers. You really change your opinion and you have an appreciation for this beautiful mathematical art of astrology. So when we talk about divisional charts, they specifically will be in reference to a different area of your life. Just as when you look at the birth chart and you're looking at the different houses for different areas of your life, you can take it down deeper to look at specific areas, such as the D10, which is called the Dasumsha chart. You can look at that chart for career and career only. You can't read relationships or children into that chart. It's just specifically what type of career you should do and opportunities when they come for your career. So everything is divided by 10. I don't want to go into the mathematics. It's actually in my book, but it's the 10th division. Now, the Navamsha chart, which we're going to talk about in detail today, is the most important divisional chart, and it is D9. Everything is divided into 9 portions. The signs are divided up into 9 portions. And what's so fascinating about the Navamsha is that there are 108 Navamshas. Did you ever wonder where the beauty of this number 108 came from? Well, in Vedic astrology, the Navamsha chart has 108 Navamshas. Now, I could go into a lot more with that, but let's just keep it as that. And so the Navamsha being the most important chart, divisional chart, so many people ask me, you know, do you become your Navamsha? How do you read the Navamsha right after you get through reading the birth chart? How do you decipher everything through another chart? Well, the Navamsha chart in some places will say spouse. And it does reflect and it does give predictive tools as to when one will marry and more into what your spouse will be like. But overall, the Navamsha chart is also what you are evolving into. The Navamsha actually means the fruit of the tree. So what it means is, will the potential in the birth chart bear fruit? That's what the Navamsha reads. But when you go into certain dashas, you can read those planets in the Navamsha, such as you go into your Venus Mahadasha. Where is Venus in the Navamsha? It will activate that house in your life, what it represents, where it is in your birth chart, but also the Navamsha. And if you went into Venus's Mahadasha, and it just so happens that Venus is in the 7th house of the Navamsha, that would be a strong indication that you could get married then. Okay, the D9, the 7th house, it is relative to marriage. But overall, when you see planets in the birth chart that are weak, but they become strong by going to really strong signs in the Navamsha, that means that that planet will pick up strength, especially as you age and get older. So you are constantly becoming your Navamsha chart. You're developing into it. That's why I tell people, you really don't understand your Navamsha chart till you reach your 40s. I know this because I've lived it. You know, everybody wants to read it, you know, when they're in their 20s and 30s, but it will make total sense. Some of the things that you read in it won't make sense till you reach your 40s. Then all of a sudden you go, that's what it was. Well, you could read it and you know you're edging towards that, but you don't really realize it in the fullest capacity. Live it, in other words, till you reach your 40s. But you're always evolving and becoming the Navamsha. It's what we're aspiring to. It's our fruit of the tree, what we will achieve. It's in that Navamsha chart. So it covers all areas of life. And planets that are weak in the birth chart pick up strength by their sign and placement in the Navamsha. We become stronger over time. Likewise, it can also indicate that strength will become weaker as you age and get older. And yes, you can work to overcome these things through seeing what's in the chart. Nothing is destined. Everything is our karma. And our charts will reveal what karma we're here to experience. And yes, we can grow through it. And we can improve it if we don't like what it's saying. We have free will. But these are definitely our natural proclivities and tendencies. And it's hard to fight against that sometimes. All right? But that's the Navamsha chart. Now, there's also a Saptamsha, which is D7, and that will reveal children. And when you go into certain dashas, if they're in the 5th house in the Saptamsha chart, it could represent that's the time you'll have children. And it will represent whether you could have children. Is Jupiter, the planet for children, strong in the Saptamsha chart? Is it in a good sign, which is sign of rulership or exalted? Then there's a likelihood for children. And of course, the 5th house. Everything needs to be weighed out. There's also the Drekana chart, which is very important, the D3. And of course, everything to do with what the 3rd house is about is what that divisional chart is about, which is siblings. So if you have a sibling that's wonder if they're about to get married, you can see it in the D3. But it doesn't only reflect siblings, because the third house, which I always say is the most underestimated house in the chart, deals with our courage and our willpower. How important is that? We can't achieve anything unless we have courage and willpower. And that's what the D3 chart will tell you. Where is your courage? Where is your willpower? Where's that will to achieve? Very important. Of course, it can deal with travels as well. Third house deals with travel and learning. So the D3 is vitally important. And you know, Western astrologers always talk about the decans. Where'd this come from? They divide a sign up into 3, and that's the decans, D3. That's where it originated from. Now, there are other divisional charts, such as the Dwadasamsha chart, the D12, divide the sign up into 12 portions. And what that reflects is your past lives. So this is really getting deep, right? Past lives and your parents. So therefore, you can read things about your parents through the D12 chart. Very, very important. So you see, there's all these divisions that are so important, and there's many of these divisional charts. You'll be surprised how many there are. But to be perfectly honest, the ones I just read off to you are the ones that I use. The other ones are more obscure. And yes, here's another variable that you might consider. When you have twins that are born like a minute apart, how do you decipher the differences in their life? And they are vast. In Western astrology, you'd have the same identical chart. How does that read different? But the divisional charts will be different with twins. And there is even a divisional chart. Of course, you have to have accurate birth times. That is a half a minute different. And that reads an entirely different perspective in some ways in life. And twins are different. This makes so much sense, doesn't it? So I want to give you a little example, the example that's in my book, Eastern Astrology for Western Minds, because it really does give such a difference. One thing I put up in my chart, it's called How to Predict the Rise and Fall of Wealth and Power. Well, I put up the charts in this book of President George W. Bush, and I also put up the chart of Michael Milken. And from base value, when you look at their charts, they're identical. They're born one day apart, I think, but their charts are the same. They have all the planets in the same signs. But their divisional charts are very different. So they even have the same ascendant. So looking at these two, those of you that don't know who Michael Milken was, I mean, he went to prison for junk bonds that, you know, he was doing a Ponzi scheme. When you look at their Navamshas, they are entirely different. And one thing I do want to put up is, let me just put up both their charts so you can see. You're looking at the same chart. But let me show you their Navamshas. Now, their Navamsha chart I'm putting up. And looking at that, George W. Bush, who became President of the United States, has 1, 2, 3, 4, including Uranus, 5 planets in the 10th house of career. Now, during the time that he won the presidency, there were planets in that 10th house in the Navamsha that were activated by his dashas. But notice Saturn, Moon, Jupiter, Mars, and Uranus in the 10th house. Of course he's going to be president. You could see it all in the Navamsha. I actually wrote an article after he won the presidency, and I called that article, The Power of the Navamsha. Now, if you look at Michael Milken's Navamsha chart, notice he has that Mars, Jupiter, Uranus in Leo, and they go to the 8th house, which is what? A house. It can be a house of brilliance and genius and scientific minds, but it also can deal with corruption. And unfortunately, they took the latter. Well, really, both things applied to him, because let me tell you something. He went to prison for the junk bonds, and he had to pay over $1 million in restitution. And while he was in prison, he made it all back by creating some kind of school and education. So the guy's got a brilliant mind, let's face it. But in the Navamshas, you can see entirely different outcomes from the birth chart. That's my whole point, showing you this. And when you team up the transiting planets along with the Navamsha planets, that's where you start to see how all of this can be so specifically predicted. Now, you know, Vedic astrology has been said to be so much better for prediction. Why? Because we have these divisional charts. We have these dashas that we get to put together with the divisional charts. And therefore, it makes a prediction so much more accurate. So that's just a little taste I thought I might put in your mouth about how these divisional charts can work. They're truly amazing and so specific, and they do depend on an accurate birth time. But this is the book if you want to just get started with it, get a taste of what my university's like, what my students get to study, and I hope that you will become a student looking at all this. So let me just say this. It's been a pleasure having my Patreon page and all these wonderful, wonderful members that help me and talk to me and give me ideas. This is just amazing. What a way to have a community. I never would have dreamt that this was all possible back in the day when I had my center on Lover's Lane, and we barely could even get charts done with computers way back in the day. But now we've come forward. These computer programs can calculate these divisional charts lickety-split in 1 second. So become part of Patreon. Be part of my university if you're interested in Vedic astrology. We will work together, and we're going to make Vedic astrology mainstream. So with that, I'll close. Thank you.